Okay, all. Thank you for joining us. Going to give it just another minute or two, and then we'll go ahead and fire it up. But appreciate everyone joining in. Got it looks like about 20 folks on the call so far, and the numbers are ticking up. Our early poll question was if folks recognize that we still have a partial government shutdown, so allow extra time for any upcoming travel. Also, any folks out there that have questions, please submit your questions through the Q&A function within Zoom, and then at the end of the call, we'll be running through those. I'm going to go ahead and start us off. My name is Ken Musante, and on behalf of Chorus, thank you all for joining us today. Payments is already automated. What's changed is that we now have systems that sound confident while making probabilistic decisions. When we come across people who are arrogantly wrong, we call them idiots. With AI, we call it the politically correct hallucinations. Today, we're not here to debate AI hype. We're here to separate where in payments AI is a force multiplier and where it insidiously manufactures risk. In our world, when something breaks, it's not theoretical. It's money, reputation, and regulatory exposure. Payment companies are being impacted by AI. We see that in valuations, workflow, and business plans. Today, with the fine folk here, we're going to explore specifics. Let me introduce our guests, and as I do, we'll share a caricature of the panelist's alter ego. Joe Emig, Chief Revenue Officer at AltoPay. Joe is a payments veteran with more than 20 years experience leading teams in the card acceptance industry. With expertise in cross-border payments, multi-currency processing, fraud and risk mitigation, and deployment of alternative payment methods, Joe has assisted thousands of merchants in developing their full spectrum payment strategies for worldwide commerce. When he's not working, Joe enjoys playing golf and watching college football and college basketball. If he ever makes a hole in one, his life will be complete. Kapil Prashad. Kapil is co-founder and Chief Product and Technology Officer at Paysley, a vertically integrated and product-driven fintech whose payments infrastructure is powered by Visa. With 27 years in fintech, Kapil leads technology strategy and product development across their point of sale acquiring and real-time payments platforms. He is currently focused on integrating AI across Paisley's product stack with roughly 25% of their code base already AI generated and a target of over 60% by the end of 2026. Kapil, I had to look up if fintech had really been around for 27 years, and to your benefit, it had.
I got the
Ben
gray hairs
Griefer.
to prove it can.
Hey, I wish I had gray hairs. Ben Griefer. Ben is President and Chief Operating Officer at Maverick Payments. He leads the company's overarching strategy and oversees all operations, focusing on risk management, strategic vendor relations, and key tech development. Coupled with its partner-centric approach, Maverick Payments competes with the largest providers in the industry by delivering enterprise-level technology and maintaining ownership of all operational functions, enabling its partners to grow and scale with greater control over the entire merchant lifecycle. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us today. Let's start with where AI is working. AI belongs in support triage and ticketing, knowledge access for agents, merchant onboarding document review, fraud signal enrichment, and detecting reconciliation anomalies. All right, this is a question I'm throwing it out for all panelists. When did AI move from interesting to unavoidable inside each of your organizations?
So I think
All right. Yep.
from
Go
our
ahead, Ben.
end, um, we've grown pretty substantially the last few years, and AI has, essentially given our team superpower, right, in terms of scale, efficiency, and automation. So we looked at merchants have expectations for quicker response, around the clock, support, quick access to knowledge centers and tutorials, and support tickets. And AI allows a lot of automation to be done while you can provide kind of in the moment responses to things that are more straightforward, in terms of navigating your portal or pulling reporting or assistance with reconciliation, responding to a chargeback, things that are fairly black and white. And when you look at scale and kind of the expectation consumers have nowadays with everything being app driven, the expectation is they can do something on a Saturday night. And a lot of the times, small business owners are doing things like that after hours when maybe you don't have full support or you have limited support. And that's where AI has been able to kind of fill the gap on really providing more of that, straightforward responses and almost air traffic controller on where to pull the knowledge, where to pull the information, and being able to act, almost as a level one support rep.
Did I hear that correctly that you use it for merchant vetting?
Yes,
So somebody can come in 24/7, say, hey, look, here's a merchant type, here's an URL, and Maverick would spit back out, yeah, this is a merchant type you could proceed with.
correct. So onboarding, underwriting, and again, understanding what boundaries make sense. You kind of mentioned the regulatory exposure. So lower risk merchants, black and white merchants, those make a lot more sense where you can systematically kind of decision or provide access to what information is needed onboarding wise, where gray area, higher risk merchants, they ultimately need some level of human intervention. I think that's where pairing the two provides a huge opportunity for automation and scale.
So you might get a response back that says, hey, with this condition, we would accept it, or you should speak to a support person to validate before you do a lot of spend a lot of calories on this.
Essentially, yes, yeah.
Kapil, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think, taking a slightly different approach from an engineering and more product focused fintech side for us. I mean, this transition is going on now, I would say, or maybe a few months back. I think there were three roads on the product development side that kind of converged. One, internally, our products had reached this maturity level where it made sense to layer on agentic or AI LLM based feature sets. Two, obviously, the model capabilities, Anthropic, namely, have evolved significantly over the past several months. And three, and this kind of sometimes goes overlooked, is interop and integration with, SDLC, like engineering tooling, if you will. The advent of GitHub Copilot and the Anthropic models, integrating well in a way that makes sense for our engineering and product teams. That really helped us pull the trigger when those three kind of lanes converged. And that's when we started putting ideas into action and creating features on top of Paisley POS and Paisley Connect, and started thinking about Paisley agentic development as well. So we're kind of going through that transition now because of those three focus areas converging together.
So, Kapil, you're describing it from the standpoint of your developers using AI to develop code, right? Ben was talking about it from the experience of his agents. You're thinking about it and talking about it as a CTO. Hey, look, we're now using more and more code, and you talked about the specific tools that your team is using to take that 25% code base that you have, which was AI developed, and to leverage that up to an even higher percentage, and along with some of the current press releases have even more of that created with AI, right? That's where you're going.
That's true. Writing code using AI, and also testing code using AI, and the entire SDLC approach, but also building agentic feature sets on top of our product stack. So I'm approaching it more from the product development angle, and I think Ben is approaching it more from the enterprise operational sense, from a tooling angle, both of which are, highly relevant, just different audiences.
Joe, would you have specific workflows that you would point to that have measurably improved because of AI?
Yeah, Ken, I'm coming at this from a commercial and a business development standpoint, and where does AI fit into the typical suite of soft skills and, sales focused outreach type of skill set that teams I manage typically have in attracting a customer base and supporting a customer base. For us, AI has gone from interesting to unavoidable in the sense that we can do much deeper consultant grade type of research and understanding who our client prospects are and who our competition is. We can exploit competitive advantages that we feel that we have in terms of our solution set. We can identify pain points in a merchant's journey and solve for those sort of in the diligence stage of sales engagement, where AI helps us go really deep on understanding what a competitor has in market or where a merchant might be suffering, and a solution that we can bring to market can be helpful. So we can come pre-prepared into conversations and use AI to really have a knowledge-rich type of conversation. It helps us in the early exploratory discovery stages with clients, and then in an ongoing customer support standpoint, it really lets us have a more robust conversation as merchants are looking to grow their business through a payments solution and sort of have customer success elements to that we can provide. It's happening faster than I thought it would in terms of just getting info rich through the use of AI and those types of engagements, and it sort of enhances the relationship overall.
So if you're putting together a presentation or a statement of work or responding to an RFP, you can do that obviously much more quickly, and it sounds like you're using AI in that context.
Yeah, it's kind of a ride-along consultant, right? That you would typically use a consultant house to help, build big proposals for, identify key metrics, look at elements that you're going to tackle in order to differentiate. AI does that with pretty well-written prompts. It's like having a ride-along consultant to help us in that process.
Sure. So you're able to perhaps respond as a small company, making yourself look much larger than you are.
Yeah, I think so. Or capture, a grander type of solution set in our proposals and our statements of work that, yeah, typically larger companies have historically had.
Kapil, if we go back to the programming, the dev that your engineers are doing, how do you make sure that you have appropriate guardrails so that code they're deploying that was written in AI is compatible with existing code or doesn't have an inferior security layer in it?
Yeah, so it depends on what part of the software development lifecycle that you're talking about. So, for example, we've got AI, we're utilizing AI to write code. We're utilizing AI to write the scripts that test the code, unit testing. We're utilizing AI to perform security reviews, right? So I think at each point, I mean, trust is built in iterations, and I think right now, the where we are in the evolutionary stage of what AI is to kind of become, I think right now the only way to really do that is through human oversight. So at each point in time, let's say for example, during the code build process, we have an AI model performing a security review, right? Someone is going to review the review. So essentially, what happens is the granular items, the minuscule, more molecular items of that review are, done by AI, but you still have a human performing the reviews or reviewing the reviews in that sense. Therefore, you're taking advantage of, what AI can do and how detailed it is. But at the same time, you're accounting for both one model retraining to make things better and help AI help the models evolve, and two, creating those guardrails. I think that's really the only way that I would, implement such guardrails is through human intervention.
I got a follow-up question on that. So if we think about where AI is leveraged within payments and some of the applications for it, cross-border complexity is ripe for AI opportunities, as is alternative rails and agentic commerce. But thinking about what you just referenced in agentic commerce, right? If AI agents start transacting, what breaks first?
Yeah, so I think, definitely authorizations and risk are going to be the first to fall, followed by chargeback. It's interesting. You've got Visa coming up with agentic protocols now, which are a combination of both identity regulatory kind of frameworks And I think, and you've got actually, agents by Christmas. You've got Amazon rolling out, I think, Buy for Me, I think it's called, right? And you've got MasterCard that's going to allow, MasterCard users to have their agents purchase things, I think, by Christmas. So this is, first of all, agents transacting. This is something that's going to happen in short order. The problems that accompany it, I think, quarter one of next year is going to be an interesting time. I think as agentic commerce evolves, you'll have agentic protocols similar, like level three, for example, and transacting nodes, transacting agents will eventually have to map to these protocols. Otherwise, they won't. There'll be some sort of penalty system, et cetera, like level three or CEPD. So I think that will help. But in terms of bad actors, I think the entire paradigm of fraud detection and risk is going to change vastly in transactional risk. For example, friendly fraud is 60 or 70% of all fraud now. And once bad acting agents can emulate the real agents and create fraud mimicking their identity, that's highly problematic because you can do it at scale. And there's a decent amount of that happening now. I think the other side of the coin, interestingly enough, right now, if you look at risk mitigation, it's about looking at anomalies. Hey, you've got this average ticket, where's the deviation, right? But in the world of AI, perfection becomes an anomaly in a sense because the bad acting agents are going to be able to mimic the good agents so well that it basically flips the entire risk paradigm on its head. How that's going to turn out, I'm not exactly sure, but that's something to watch out for. It's a very different world.
Thank you. And I want to get rid of using friendly fraud and start calling it first party fraud because there's nothing friendly about it, obviously. But Ben, shifting back to you, you mentioned some of the processes that changed, and you've also mentioned some of the issues that you've had as you've grown. But as volume grows within Maverick, which decisions become bottlenecks if they rely on humans?
I think, when you have a repetitive task that you can put into kind of containers that make sense and they're straightforward, those tend to be the ones that are more, on the administrative level or an entry level, level one type of a person. And that's where I think, AI provides a lot of, support and enablement for scale, right? Is if we're underwriting merchants and you have to run KYC, KYB queries and negative news searches and things like that, that can be done systematically. You can even have the system give you advice on what may make sense, whether it's a suggested approval or decline, or even build in decisioning for approving. So I think when you look at scale and bottlenecks, it's the tedious work. I think Kapil, you mentioned it's the same thing, right? Is getting the nitty gritty things done systematically. A lot of that can be kind of a repetitive task. You can train an AI agent to use with some framework and guardrails, and obviously integrating whether it's a credit policy or underwriting criteria. And then the humans come in really for whether it's quality assurance and oversight or decisioning on, the things that require some level of a judgment call. So it's just trying to draw the line and kind of pair the two together.
Jensen Wong says that the robots should be used for the D's: dull, dirty, and dangerous. So I guess that's the first D. So, but thinking about that and staying on that, when AI is working well, should merchants even know that AI is being leveraged?
I think in a perfect world, no. I think AI could support overall user experience in a way that just makes processes more frictionless and seamless. And onboarding is a great example, right? I think if merchants who don't know obviously the nuance of underwriting rules and criteria and regulatory requirements, they just see a very fluid onboarding experience that's frictionless, and their expectation is that it's going to be quick and painless. And if they're in a lower risk business, they're going to have kind of a quick, instant onboarding experience, similar to what you would see with, the larger providers out there. Merchants understand too that when they're in a higher risk vertical, there's some level of enhanced due diligence. So again, they may not expect an automated decision right then and there, but what they would expect is some kind of a dynamic onboarding flow that tells them, hey, based on your business type, here are the, additional items we need from that enhanced due diligence perspective. And then again, the system's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, so that by the time it gets to a human for that general, review and overview and making sure everything makes sense, they can quickly decision it. So again, it's kind of pairing the two together, building the paths that make sense based on, risk tolerance or appetite or verticals or whatever guardrails are in place. But no, at the end of the day, the merchant should see a very automated, frictionless experience that kind of dynamically works with them. And it's, merchants don't understand, again, payments and the nuance, and it's our job to make it very easy and smooth. Meanwhile, we obviously need to maintain certain, regulatory requirements on the back end. And again, it's kind of striking the right balance.
Leveraging AI in that way, though, you're not going to have a wholesale reduction in labor force. You may have some incremental gains and not need to hire people at the same rate, but you wouldn't have a wholesale reduction in your force in that context that you just described. Would you agree with that statement?
I guess it depends on what your portfolio blend is and what your trajectory is. And yeah, I mean, it may curb staffing needs going forward from maybe like a administrative perspective. But I think it would depend on a few things to see how much of an impact it would have to current workforce. I do think though that with what we've seen, it has a substantial impact to onboarding, risk reviews, ticket allocation, support inquiries. And then what you can do is, repurpose the team to do the things that AI cannot do, those exceptions, the escalated scenarios, the cases that, need human intervention. And the largest kind of incremental impact we're seeing is we're able to drastically get faster with SLA. So, it's not, hey, let's just maintain status quo and get rid of people. We can actually get a lot better and more sophisticated and faster without, maybe having as many people. And you can also do a lot of this stuff around the clock. And it goes again back to what I said, which is small business owners are not really, doing things like this during normal business hours because they're running their business and they'll do it later in the day. And that's what we try to support as well. So I think it goes back to just having the right balance where AI could enable and facilitate just a tremendous amount of automation and overall experience and responsiveness, but just understanding how to integrate it with humans and kind of your general operational workflows.
Thank you. At the end, I want to circle back given Block's announcement, but I got a couple more things I want to make sure we get through in the interim. Joe, going back to you, you mentioned with regards to biz dev, some of the ways that you're leveraging AI to better yourself and better your offer. What are some of the potential pitfalls that you've seen leveraging AI in sales engagement?
It's early days, right? And I'll tell you an example. I had a call, a business call a couple weeks ago with a referral partner of ours and then a merchant prospect. And together with this referral partner, we were chatting with the merchant, had a great call. It was kind of an exploratory discovery call with some takeaways at the end of the call, as would be customary. And about 30 minutes after the call ended, I got an email, copied on an email that was sent out to the merchant summarizing the call. And it was evident to me that the email had been written by AI. A little bit too professional, a little bit too touchy-feely. The formatting was a little bit too structured with emojis for bullet points and all the hallmarks of sort of a chat GPT outputted type of a conversation. I felt a little bit of embarrassment for my referral partner there because it was obvious that it had been AI generated. In the biz dev world, in the world of sales engagement, we still value relationships. We still value human connection. We still value trusting the other party with our business, right? AI is going to accelerate so many things we can do, but I don't think the question has been answered yet about how does it become a substitute for true human interaction or relationships. And I think a pitfall, to answer your question, Ken, is over-reliance on obvious AI starts to disintermediate people from people, and eventually a relationship to business like payments can suddenly start to feel cold and a little bit artificial. So I've already cautioned my sales teams, hey, use AI in content creation, yes, but not at the expense of personalizing it, not at the expense of losing your own voice, and certainly not at the expense of managing relationships.
Really good specific example. We were talking before this call really about, making sure AI is not used, for example, in air traffic control. Within payments, it shouldn't be used as a sole authority in merchant terminations, SAR-related decisions, immutable money movement, regulatory interpretation, high liability underwriting, and some type of black box policy enforcement. But Ben, going back to your world, if your model is wrong 1% of the time, what's the real world cost?
I mean, it can be catastrophic, right? You can have maybe a higher risk merchant that has substantial exposure or flagged for some risk review. And I think that's, again, you have to have a really good balance of kind of building the containers where you have more of a dynamic, criteria that makes sense. So if you have lower risk merchants, those would obviously be treated drastically different from higher risk merchants. And maybe you can decision more systematically and in an automated way the lower risk businesses because of the exposure and things like that. And AI, it's great to automate and facilitate a lot of the tedious administrative work and do things that you know entry level or level ones or even twos are doing, but it can be very costly. And I think AI it can't replace the human judgment call element of looking at a merchant, whether it's through underwriting or risk, and really understanding that maybe the dots do not all connect, and that the exposure maybe was calculated incorrectly because the merchant, whether it was they were being malicious or just didn't understand the onboarding flow, they selected the wrong fulfillment timelines, and then it calculated the wrong non-delivery exposure. So again, I think it's understanding how do you create the paths between lower risk and higher risk merchants, and you have the guardrails in place and some level of human involvement and quality assurance. So it can be very costly, and you have to be very mindful that it's not set it and forget it. It's not kind of a shotgun approach. It needs to be very intentional based on kind of the appropriate risk, not only with the merchant verticals, but obviously at the enterprise level from a risk tolerance perspective and appetite. And then obviously being mindful of any card brand rules and requirements, regulatory requirements. So it's not an easy answer because there's a lot of nuance that goes into it. But yeah.
What I'm hearing is that for a high risk merchant, you'll use tools, whatever your adjudicating tools are, to provide that information to a human, but you ultimately want a human to evaluate those signals and then provide the response.
Yeah, it's a waterfall, right? So if you have merchants that are in certain verticals that require maybe high brand risk registration, or verticals that are more scrutinized with regulators, those would be the ones that you never want to auto approve and auto board, right? You can collect the information using AI to kind of dynamically tell the merchant what's needed in terms of enhanced due diligence, but you would always want intervention with those. On the opposite side of the spectrum, you might have a card present, grocery store that you can not only dynamically and systematically kind of walk through the onboarding process and verifying bank account ownership and driver's license if they don't pass the CIP or identity verification. But those could be systematically onboarded like you would see with some of the mainstream companies out there. So it's building the right framework based on the merchant vertical, the associated risk, whether it's compliance, reputational, financial, and plugging it in where it makes the most sense without exposing too much risk And again, just making it dynamic and integrated where it makes the most sense.
Capio, thinking about it from your perspective, CTO's perspective, where have you deliberately chosen not to apply AI, even though others may be doing it? It might seem attractive to some, but you've pushed back and said, no, we're not doing it here.
So I would say we have deliberately chosen not to apply AI right now. And I think that's an important point to make. Things are moving so fast, Ken. And the things that AI didn't do well 3 months ago, it's doing well now. The iterations are collapsing. So for example, I think let's talk about security reviews. We implemented, AI driven security reviews on code best practices during the software development lifecycle. And what happened was that we found it actually created some bugs within the code and possibly made suggestions that it shouldn't have. It wasn't up to date on the latest kind of security updates that were happening within the larger tech ecosystem. Now, that was a few months ago. And just
So back up a second. I'm sorry to interrupt, but just describe a security review for everyone. What did that entail? And from what a engineer does today versus what you would have AI do.
checking the code for security holes and bumping the code up against the latest threat protocols, right? Now, AI didn't do a great job of that, but recently, both Microsoft and the other bigwigs of AI have integrated their models with the latest threat databases. So now you have AI connected with the latest threat databases from Google, Microsoft, and even the government. So it can instantly recognize the latest and greatest threats and give you better advice. Now that timeline collapse, that's a decision we made roughly 2.5 months ago, and we're going to have to reevaluate maybe next month. So I think, I don't know that there is anything on the table right now in that box of, hey, I don't think that, AI won't be able to do this in the medium to long-term future. So we're definitely casting a wide net and we're reevaluating as things are evolving in a very rapid manner, right? So we have strategic meetings on a weekly basis, in fact, focused on what's happening, every evolution in AI is looked at. How can we get more granular? Does it make sense for Paisley from a product development standpoint, or from an engineering standpoint, or from an operational standpoint? And from there, we action those items or reaction. So, that's one example where it didn't make sense, but it may make sense. And, I think that's the only purview through which we can look at AI, because to be honest, in my view, I don't know that there's anything that it won't be able to do over the next 24 to 36 months, keeping the long term in mind.
Joe, Ben, any reaction to that?
Well, going back to Kapil's earlier comment about agentic and watching out for bad actors, we typically think of agentic as being, if we had to put it on one side or the other of the payments world, we think of it on the issuing side. It's sort of a customer enhancing tool that's going to allow commerce as an extension of the cardholder, right? Some interesting conversations I've had recently are on the merchant side, which would sit on the acquiring side, which is to say, if cardholder agents are out there scouring the internet for the best deals and pulling the trigger on a transaction on behalf of a customer, how can a merchant benefit from that? Is there an agentic use case where ultimately merchants can be found by these agents when the agents are curating offers for the cardholder? What can the merchant do to do the equivalent of getting themselves on the first page of Google, for example, right? To be seen by these agents. So whoever invents tools, whoever brings to market products that serve merchants and allow the merchants to be seen by the agents, I think that's going to tie the ecosystem on the agentic side together, cardholder side and merchant side, to create commerce. And and whoever uses these tools, whichever merchants are able to find and deploy these types of tools, maybe build them for themselves in-house to be part of that curation environment that the agents are active in. That's going to give those merchants a head start in their own individual sectors. So these are the types of conversations that merchants are asking us about as payments leaders and innovators. I don't know where that goes yet. I don't know if those tools exist yet today, but it seems to me like the use case is there, and the technology is probably not far behind.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, Joe. And I think, up until this point, look, at the end of the day, payments is infrastructure, right? Just like oil or just like utilities. And our goal as payment providers historically has been to board the merchant, kind of help them operate their payment, on our payment rails and make sure that they don't attrit. But I think there's an opportunity ad-libbing on what you said, is for payment providers to be more than just the provider of those rails and really getting into, agentic SaaS, agentic, revenue opportunities, kind of creating a service layers for merchants beyond just offering the equipment and traditional payment rails. So that's interesting to see how that's going to evolve.
Yeah, and will the card networks ultimately try to own those things? Today we see the card networks actively picking up technologies and adding them to their core payment processing, which are sort of bolt-on, value adds in the payments chain. Will the card networks, if they control the protocols for agentic to work, will they also sort of build these technologies internally or acquire them, or will they exist as third-party add-ons that we as payment companies can resell? There's a whole commercial infrastructure and consideration around that. I don't think the question is whether these tools are coming. It's just sort of who's going to bring them to market.
Question from the audience that I'll throw out to the group. Are you seeing teams struggle to adapt AI tools? And if so, what have you done to help them navigate that shift?
I'll take that just briefly. On the sales side, yes, right, because it's such a relationship-focused business and soft skills matter so much. I've seen the sales teams be hesitant at first to trust AI, and again, going back to the comment I made earlier, there's a lot of caution in our training around what sort of content are you putting out there to represent yourself. Do you feel comfortable owning that content if it's generated by AI? So yeah, on the sales side, we're sort of dipping a toe in the water there and not just going full bore on automated output.
And the same thing from our end, when you look at support and just operational scale, whether it's merchant support, partner support, Joe, your example was great, which is when it's obviously AI, it loses the human element and it can be embarrassing. And I think that's where you can leverage AI to, draft emails or follow-ups or memos or responses, but a human needs to go through and really provide a personal touch on it.
Mhm.
And we've seen that with our team is, some people, they don't know how to find the right balance, right? They may be too reliant where they just copy and paste. And it's the same kind of example that Joe had mentioned, or maybe they're not using it at all because they're not familiar with Copilot or whatever it is. So it's, how do you find the right balance between leveraging it, but not, having it kind of overcompensate for that human element, which I think is so valuable in our business.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, this gets
Yeah, and I
back
think from
to
a technology standpoint, as someone who's attempting to roll out AI throughout the organization, I think we're just managing this in the same way as we would the rollout of any given tool. Let's say we're rolling out Teams or some new tooling that's going to impact operation, right? Operating procedures, pro tips, et cetera, and try and get that out to the team members and a feedback cycle to help improve the process, really.
speaking about people within the organization, back to Block from their quarterly report. We have seen engineering work that would have taken years to complete done by a small team in a fraction of the time with agentic coding tools. And Block is seeing over a 40% increase in production code shipped per engineer since September. Now, they use that within their quarterly report to also announce a huge layoff. I'd forgotten the percentage of their staff, but it was a very significant percentage of their staff. Do you all think that Block's decision to cut staff is the first of many that we'll see throughout payments, and in line with with one of the questions from the floor? What does someone working in payments need to learn today that they probably didn't need 5 years ago?
So I think To answer your first question, companies that are overstaffed will use, I think, AI as an excuse. And I think we're looking at how do we incrementally leverage it and embed it as we continue to grow and be methodical as we look at staffing forecasting. So I think companies that front loaded a lot of their staffing and not now are realizing after the fact what AI can do, it unfortunately causes things like this to happen. And that's kind of the excuse they're using for massive layoffs, which I think it was around 40%. So for us, we're trying to be more mindful that as we staff, how can we simultaneously implement things like this to avoid situations like that? So again, I think it's finding the right balance of forecasting not only from a headcount perspective, but simultaneously integrating AI to enable and support that growth.
Yeah, exactly. I think, big tech, they're big. They have a big bench, right? So they definitely will use that as an excuse. I think in terms of, what they mentioned in the report, we're seeing similar advantages. Our code review times have collapsed from weeks to hours, refactoring times, moving code from one framework to the other, things that would have taken weeks or months can be done in days, right? So I would definitely agree with the sentiment, but as a startup, our resources are very finite. So we definitely see AI is a productivity multiplier for our existing team. We don't have anyone that we can possibly lay off. So I think it just depends on how big your bench is. I think you will continue to see that on the big tech side. I think the movement within the technology infrastructure providers, like the Googles and the Microsofts of the world, the pace of their development is quite rapid. But the organizations outside of that particular frontier, adoption is a lot slower. So I think there's a huge kind of bifurcation in between, between a company like Block and other folks outside of the technology paradigm.
Have you guys heard the term SaaSpocalypse?
Have
And to what extent, what parts of the payment industry are vulnerable to the SaaSpocalypse?
I mean, I think SaaS is going to go through a very rapid agentic revolution. I don't see it dying out as that the nomenclature would indicate. I just see it evolving quite rapidly and becoming something far more intelligent, really. I think the organizations within the SaaS space that are able to adapt, I think will survive, and the ones that can't won't.
Thank you. All right. So I want to take kind of the last 5 minutes before we turn it over to Q&A to think about how you all would advise leaders. If you were advising another leader, where would you encourage them to look into first with AI? And I guess what mindset matters more than the technology itself?
From our end, we've been very mindful of user experience. So we look at what tasks are repetitive that you can put framework in place that, systematically an AI agent can come in and replicate, whether it's the underwriting, analysis, pulling the queries for KYC, KYB, going out and doing preset, negative news searches, business validation, things like that, or what are the common inquiries we get when it comes to merchant support? How do you heat map topics and things like that? So how do we automate a lot of these repetitive, high volume tasks, but being very mindful of whether there's corresponding risk, whether it's on the underwriting and risk side of the house, or it's, reputation when it comes to merchant experience and having humans available for those complicated, escalated types of matters. If a merchant just needs to get someone on the phone and have them walk them through their statement or reconciliation. So to us, it's striking the right balance of how do you use it to scale. Kapil put it well as productivity multiplier, but you don't want to compromise support and that personal relationship, and really just making sure it's a good integrated pairing between AI, but also still having the human touch.
You all are based in and have a lot of employees in California, Ben. So your staffing is very expensive, and I guess that's why it makes sense to be looking at repetitive tasks and how you can take and move that from a staff position to an automated position. But a question from the floor that might dovetail well into this: when starting these AI initiatives, were you targeting a specific ROI or were you iterating?
Yeah, I think we were iterating, right? So we're looking at, how do we increase production? How do we expedite SLAs? How do we enable more, on the user experience? And, we live in a world where people kind of expect real-time responses, right? Whether it's trying to figure out how to navigate a dashboard or reconcile or respond to a chargeback or onboard a merchant. So we kind of heat map, these topics and these categories, and a lot of it's around the clock too, where we want to support the small business owner who doesn't get to closing out their books till the end of the night. Maybe they have questions, so we're looking at those repetitive tasks, the common topics and categories, which to us really just add value to kind of our culture, which is the high touch support and the responsiveness. And that's where, again, you can have a combination of the two where it provides that automation and, also kind of indirectly supports faster SLAs and being able to get, your physical staff to be able to work other tasks or tickets or phone queues in a much expedited manner because now these, kind of minor tasks can be systematically taken care of. So again, it's the combination of the two, and really the iterations that we're seeing.
Joe, how would you answer that to another payments leader?
Look, I think the people tuning into the webinar today are probably wondering, what if I'm not an expert on AI? What if I don't know how to build tools myself? Am I falling behind? And the answer is that AI is going to be embedded everywhere. Innovators and tech providers are going to merge it in. They're already doing it. You don't have to be an expert yourself in building AI, but knowing the right way to deploy technology tools into your business plan, whatever part of the payments ecosystem you serve, is going to be important. I spoke at a conference back in 2015 on a topic of the expected rise of mobile commerce. And so the audience was there to hear about how we were going to move into this new stage of mobilized commerce away from our computer browsers and onto our phones. And I led off by saying, in 5 years, I don't think mobile commerce will exist. And there's kind of a gasp in the audience. My point was mobile commerce will be so entrenched in everything that we do that we'll never even say m-commerce anymore. It won't be a thing. It will be implied. It will be embedded. It will be the new way of living. And I think that's where AI is going too. We're talking right now about, this expected rise of AI, but as you wear it in your glasses or as you carry it in your pocket with your phone, it will be so embedded in the products that you're already utilizing and that new innovators are taking to market that it will sort of be second thought. It will be this implied presence that's everywhere that we go. And if you're a business owner, if you're serving a certain segment of payments today, I think you're going to be looking for forward-thinking, innovative types of payments products on the assumption that AI will be powering that, but really looking to create these efficiencies that Kapil and Ben have been talking about, maybe operationally, maybe from a compliance and risk management perspective. You don't have to be an expert in all those things, but you should be looking for products that are leveraging these types of tools to create those efficiencies for you.
Very good point. And I guess prescient statement 15 years ago or 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So thank you. Kapil, what would you
Yeah,
advise another payments leader?
yeah, I think, look, I couldn't agree more with what Ben and Joe said. I think there's two ways to approach this. Number one, for, payment leaders that might not necessarily have a deep, technology or product development background, there's a ton of AI tooling. AI tooling is quite advanced. It can be utilized on the financial analysis front, on the servicing front in terms of merchant support. We're utilizing it in terms of ISV integrations. One use case came to mind where we had an ISV that was integrating with a framework that we didn't have documentation on. And one of our integration leads, Scott, he utilized AI to come up with a whole integration kind of model diagram and even helped out with the coding, even in a language that they didn't understand. So the use cases for the tooling is vast. I would encourage folks to begin using it if you're not, and continue to reevaluate. I think that's really important because it's just evolving so fast. You have to have some sort of a feedback process, maybe a monthly meeting, maybe a designated person to engage how things are going, what's working, what's not, what else we need to try, how we need to pivot. Constant improvement and constant reevaluation should definitely be part of that rollout process, whatever that is. On the engineering and product focus side, we're having success writing code, testing code, documenting code, refactoring code, and we're starting to have success actually creating agents. And writing, and even agents writing code in a sense. So there's definitely a fantastic world of AI out there that awaits, but it's iterative. So re-examine as you chart this path on the yellow brick road.
Iterative, right? So if you're running an ISO, a PayFac, or a bank program, the question is, where can we use AI to improve speed and intelligence, right? That's what we learned without weakening our control environment. That's what I think today's talk was all about. AI should increase clarity, not replace responsibility. In payments, precision beats hype every time. So I want to thank the folks for their comments and then open it up to questions. I know we've had some that have come in. Are there additional questions from the audience, Chris? Okay. This is for Capio. In the use case of being a technical product, do you think it benefits to mention AI leveraging for something to the merchants, but keep some things, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble seeing this. Leveraging for some things to the merchants, but keep some things inside knowledge or best practices without full transparency to the merchants. I think that's the gist of the question.
Yeah, I think I get it. And yeah, absolutely. Look, I think you have to draw a line between what you expose and what you don't, not just merchant facing and internal best practices, but also defining guardrails around model privacy and model ownership. And that's also this piece of AI development, which I'm confident is going to be litigated at some point in the court systems, and it's going to evolve on its own curve. Um, but yeah, absolutely. I think there's a definite case to be made on how you expose LLM to a merchant or to a partner or any consumer facing product, and what you don't want that model to be talking about. And there's ways to do that when you're creating an agent, et cetera. But yeah, absolutely, that should be done. And I think on a kind of a parallel note, I think you know, eventually there's going to be a case to be made between the public AI cloud, if you will, if Anthropic and OpenAI and these models, as they gain traction, I think what you're going to see happen is the prices will go up, and you'll just like you had cloud bloat, where everyone can click on a button, and eventually you've got this monster cloud infrastructure that costs you, $500,000 a month. You'll have a similar concept called AI bloat. So in that sense, that may cause a bit of a reevaluation in terms of how to keep your models private as well. Um, in addition to the IP rights conversation side of things. So I think privacy and how it interacts, how it kind of integrates with models in general is something that's definitely a conversation for the next 2 to 3 years on very
Thank you,
different
Kapil.
fronts.
All right. Well, on behalf of Chorus, my name's Ken Musante. Thank you for joining, and I want to thank our hosts again, Joe Emig, Kapil Prashad, and Ben Griefer. Thank you all very much for your time. Really appreciate it, and hope folks out there appreciated the presentation. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.